and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Yo-jong says South Korea cannot be a diplomatic partner, rejecting calls from Seoul to engage in talks. The United States has widened its steel and aluminum tariffs to include more than 400 new items. It now goes beyond raw metals to a broader range of goods, including fire extinguishers and machinery. U.S. President Donald Trump said Washington would not send troops to Ukraine as a security guarantee for any potential agreement, but suggested that it could provide air support as part of a peace deal to end the war with Russia. North Korea has issued a pointed message against South Korea's new administration as joint military drills with the U.S. continue. This comes as Seoul and Washington kicked off their annual summertime joint military exercise this week. Our Muniran starts us off.
North Korea's Kim Yo-jong has launched sharp criticism against President Lee Jae-myung, saying South Korea cannot be a diplomatic counterpart to Pyongyang. According to the regime's state-run Korean Central News Agency, Kim, the powerful sister of Kim Jong-un, convened a meeting with senior foreign ministry officials on Tuesday to convey her brother's foreign policy directives. In her remarks, she accused the Lee Jae-myung administration of making what she called serious efforts to appear interested in improving ties, but claimed Seoul's confrontational intent remains unchanged. She singled out President Lee's recent comments that small acts of goodwill could rebuild trust between the two Koreas, dismissing it as delusion and a pipe dream. Kim went further, saying North Korea has witnessed decades of what she described as South Korea's rotten political system, arguing that whether under the conservative or liberal government, Seoul's stance towards the North has not changed. In her words, as reported by state media, Lee Jae-myung is not the kind of great man who can alter the flow of history. She also criticized South Korea's unification, defense, and foreign ministers by name, citing their past remarks that the North's regime and military are an enemy. On military drills, Kim denounced the ongoing Ulji Freedom Shield joint military exercise between Seoul and Washington that began on Monday as a rehearsal for invasion. She claimed the allies are reviewing a new operational plan that would seek to neutralize Pyongyang's nuclear and missile capabilities and expand attacks. Kim underscored North Korea's intent to sideline Seoul in global diplomacy, instructing the foreign ministry to focus instead on countering what she called the most hostile nations and those aligned with them, saying South Korea would not even be given a minor role in regional diplomacy. Kim's remarks come as Pyongyang prepares to convene its Supreme People's Assembly on September 20th, where economic and legal issues are on the agenda, though the possibility of constitutional changes has not been ruled out. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
So as we just heard, North Korea has rejected calls from South Korea to engage in diplomacy. For more on what to expect for relations between the two Koreas, we're joined by Dr. Bong Young-sik, research fellow at the Yonsei University Institute for North Korean Studies. Dr. Bong, thanks for joining us this morning.
You're welcome.
So North Korea's Kim Yo-jong said this morning that South Korea cannot be the regime's diplomatic partner. What's behind her comment?
Well, as you know, that the Supreme Leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, made an announcement in December 2023 and early 2024 that North Korea will no longer pursue unification between two Koreas. And he redefined the inter-Korean relations as relations between two separate sovereign states in a very hostile adversarial relations. So Kim Young's message echoed the basic essence of his message that North Korea would not be interested in dealing with South Korea for the purpose of inter-Korean relations, for the ultimate purpose of unification. It'll be just a state-to-state relationship, and the preconditions for that dialogue and the cooperations to take place with the Lee Jae-myung government in South Korea installed, then South Korea has to first revise what she calls the rotten system, meaning that South Korea has to revise its constitution to define itself as a separate sovereign state from North Korea and abandon officially and permanently any desire and mechanisms of reunification. And the first step to demonstrate the goodwill on the part of South Korea will be stopping the hostile US-ROK annual joint military exercises.
I see. And the Korean government has recently been seeking to engage in talks with the North, but the regime continues to take a hardline stance against South Korea. Will North Korea continue to ignore Seoul's push to sort of ease tensions?
Well, it depends on how you define ignoring, because if North Korea is going to totally ignore Lee Jae-myung government's effort, then Kim Yo-jong and Kim Jong-un did not have to make such hostile statements in the first place, right? If you're not interested in that, you don't have to respond at all. But the fact that North Korea actually responded means that North Korea wants to pick and choose. It wants to hang South Korean government in the air, desperately hoping to see any reactivation of even minor cases of inter-Korean dialogue and cooperation, yeah, potentially in a very high cost. Meanwhile, North Korea is going to continuously play the hardball toward Lee Jae-myung of South Korea, saying that, well, you are nothing. You don't deserve any even minor seat in the diplomatic setting. We are going to only focus on the most hostile state, which is the United States, under the Trump administration. So North Korea ignoring Lee Jae-myung government's effort will be extremely strategic and selective.
See, and the EU administration said it will also work to resume inter-Korean cooperation and intends to restore an agreement to suspend military activity along the border. Now, this is as part of the so-called September 19 agreement. Do you think this measure will be effective?
Well, it depends on how you define being effective as well. That North Korea is going to pick and choose. So if South Korea is going to propose to Pyongyang to for the resumption of the September 19th military agreement, then North Korea will have a serious look at that. And if it's more beneficial than harmful, then North Korea is going to take it. That doesn't necessarily mean that North Korea is going to fundamentally change its strategic position in favor of the resumption of talks and cooperation with South Korea under the Lee Jae-myung government. Again, North Korea's focus is on the Trump administration of the United States, not South Korea.
All right, so speaking of the Trump administration, will Lee Jae-myung's summit with Trump in Washington next week open the door for talks with Kim Jong-un?
I think so, because the Trump administration has persistently emphasized that it remains interested in resuming the high-level diplomatic engagement with North Korea, as it did in the first term of the Trump presidency. So in that context, and South Korean government would want to secure the understanding and support of the Trump administration that South Korea is going to take part in any diplomatic overtures between Pyongyang and Washington. So what I expect to see in the upcoming summit meeting between President Lee Jae-myung of South Korea and President Trump of the United States is that probably in the part of the joint statement after the summit meeting, both governments would emphasize the 2018 Panmunjom Declaration in order to secure the voice and representation of South Korea in the future diplomatic developments involving North Korea, and the 2018 Singapore summit meeting as a baselines for future U.S. DPRK diplomatic negotiations.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Dr. Bong, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it. Now, over in the U.S., the Trump administration has expanded its 50% steel and aluminum tariffs to include over 400 items. The additional tariffs took effect this week and extend beyond raw metals to a wider range of goods, including machinery. Our Lee Seung-jae explains more.
The Trump administration has widened its sweeping trade agenda, expanding 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum to cover more goods. According to the U.S. Commerce Department, the new tariffs include 407 new product categories. The new levies, which took effect Monday, now extend beyond raw materials to a broad range of goods, including fire extinguishers, machinery, construction materials, and specialty chemicals. U.S. Commerce Undersecretary Jeffrey Kessler says the move shuts down avenues for circumvention and supports the revitalization of the U.S. steel and aluminum industries. However, the full list of products now facing new tariffs was released with only customs codes used to identify items, leaving companies scrambling to determine which of their goods are included. Trump has leaned heavily on sector-specific tariffs as a key tool of his trade policy. In June, he doubled the steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% for most countries, sparking concerns among U.S. trading partners. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told CNBC on Tuesday that he expects U.S. tariff revenues to rise sharply, well above his earlier estimate of $300 billion. He said that Washington intends to use the money to pay down federal debt, not to issue rebate checks to Americans. Bessent stressed that the Trump administration is laser-focused on deficit reduction, arguing that the U.S. economy could return to the good, low inflationary growth of the 1990s. However, he noted that higher interest rates are squeezing housing markets and lower-income households burdened by credit card debt, pressing the U.S. Federal Reserve to further rate cuts. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Tuesday he has ruled out sending American troops to fight in Ukraine, but suggested Washington could provide air support as part of a broader peace deal to end the war with Russia. Speaking to Fox News, Trump said while Europeans are willing to put people on the ground, the U.S. is willing to help them, probably by air. However, the U.S. president did not elaborate further. The comments came a day after Trump pledged security guarantees for Kyiv during a White House summit with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and leaders of NATO member countries. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed air support is an option and a possibility, but like Trump, offered no further details. On the local front, President Lee Jae-myung hosted business leaders at his office who will be joining his trip to Washington as he prepares for talks with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, set for next Monday. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min has this report.
With the summit with U.S. President Donald Trump less than a week away, President Lee Jae-myung hosted business leaders at his office on Tuesday, including Choi Tae-won of SK Group and Lee Jae-yong of Samsung, who will be accompanying him on his trip to Washington.
The meeting was arranged to discuss ways to maximize economic outcomes at the South Korea-U.S. summit and listen to our company's investment and purchase plans in the U.S.
As the president thanked them for their role in recent trade talks with the U.S., he called for the need to work together to turn the crisis into an opportunity amid trade uncertainties to revitalize the economy. The sentiment was echoed by the business leaders.
The business leaders agreed that the upcoming trip should serve as an opportunity to help promote our businesses entering the U.S. market and further raise our industrial competitiveness.
Late last month, a framework trade deal was reached to lower the U.S. reciprocal tariffs on South Korea from 25% to 15% in exchange for investment pledges worth hundreds of billions of dollars, with many details to be worked out in time for the first Trump summit. Areas of cooperation would be centered on chips, batteries, and shipbuilding. Security is also one of the major issues, such as South Korea's defense spending and a possible change to the role and scale of U.S. troops stationed in Korea, as Washington focuses on countering China. President Lee's trip to neighboring Japan will precede his U.S. trip for talks with Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, signaling resumption of the two neighbors' so-called shuttle diplomacy. Against this backdrop, former Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa is likely to be appointed as South Korea's ambassador to the U.S. according to sources familiar with the matter, and former ambassador to Vietnam Lee Hyuk as top envoy to Japan. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
From chart-topping K-pop groups to the Netflix animation K-pop Demon Hunters, Korean popular culture continues to transcend borders and captivate audiences around the globe. President Lee, who has long emphasized the power of culture, will join Arirang TV's special program this afternoon to reflect on the industry's rise and how to take it even further on the world stage. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin has a preview.
The driving force behind South Korea's national strength. That's how President Lee Jae-myung described Korean culture at his latest cabinet meeting on Monday, pointing to the global success of the Netflix hit K-pop Demon Hunters. The movie has become the platform's most watched animated film, while its soundtrack continues to dominate major charts, from the US Billboard to the UK's official chart. Building on that momentum, the president is set to appear on an Arirang TV special program, K-pop The Next Chapter, on Wednesday to discuss the future of the K-pop industry, the backbone of the Korean wave. He will be joined by a star-studded panel. Maggie Kang, writer and director of K-pop Demon Hunters, members Ji-hyo and Jonghyun of the K-pop girl group Twice, music producer RT, and culture critic Kim Young-dae. The presidential office says they'll share ideas on how to further expand K-pop's global reach and explore policy directions to support its growth. This follows the president's call to craft strategies to cement Korea's status as a cultural powerhouse.
관계부처는 지원하되 간섭하지 않는다는 8길이 원칙에 입각해서 K 콘텐츠의 글로벌 확산 전략 수립과 지원, 그리고 K-팝 등 관련 시설 인프라 확충을 포함해서 종합적인 대책을 마련해 주시기를 당부드립니다.
You can catch K-pop The Next Chapter on Arirang this Wednesday at 5 p.m. Korea time. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Yoon Se-young, and this is The World Now. We begin in Mexico this morning. President Claudia Sheinbaum denied on Tuesday that Mexico has reached any new agreement with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. The DEA had earlier announced what it called the Portero Project, a major operation aimed at shutting down smuggling routes that move drugs, weapons, and money across the border. But during a press briefing, Sheinbaum stressed that no Mexican security institution has signed such an agreement with the DEA. The president, who has generally been proactive toward strengthening security ties with Washington and cracking down on drug cartels, reacted sharply to what she described as a unilateral statement made without prior consultation. In the DEA statement, its administrator Terry Cole, who was recently appointed to head Washington D.C.'s police force, said the new initiative will involve planning and operating side by side with Mexican partners while bringing the full weight of the U.S. government to the fight. President Donald Trump announced on Tuesday that the White House is launching a full review of the Smithsonian museums, expressing frustration over what he perceives as an excessive emphasis on the negative aspects of American history. Trump said on social media that the museums overly highlight dark parts of U.S. history, including slavery. He added that he has instructed his attorneys to conduct a review using a process similar to the one he applied to higher education institutions. The museums expected to be affected by the review include the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the National Museum of American History, and the National Museum of Natural History. The Smithsonian has declined to comment on the matter. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has criticized French President Emmanuel Macron's decision to recognize a Palestinian state. Netanyahu said the move fuels anti-Jewish sentiment in France and rewards Hamas. He described the move as strengthening hatred toward the Jews and endangering their communities. Macron's office called Netanyahu's claims incorrect and emphasized France's ongoing efforts to combat anti-Semitism. Macron announced in July that France would formally recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September. With the third and final Downton Abbey film set to hit theater this September, fans now have the chance to own a piece of the show's history. Props and costumes from across the series are going up for charity auction. Among the items is the bell whorl from the servants' hall, expected to fetch between $6,000 and $9,000. The family car, a 1925 Sunbeam, is estimated to sell for around $40,000. All auction items, including set pieces and costumes, are currently on display in central London for free. Proceeds from the auction will go to Together for Short Lives, a charity supporting children with life-limiting conditions and their families.
Despite the season heading toward Choseol, the second autumn seasonal term that many are waiting for, the summer heat is holding strong. Heat wave alerts remain in place nationwide, and many cities had to wake up to another tropical night. And there were passing showers in parts of the capital area this morning, and more on and off showers are expected through the afternoon or into the evening in many parts, with 5 to 40 millimeters in the forecast. Meanwhile, East Coast regions will see strong winds through this morning, so please use caution. After the heat will be more intense in southern regions, with a high of 35 degrees Celsius in Gwangju this afternoon. Gyeongju will be hotter. And of course, that high humidity will push the feels-like temperatures even higher. Tomorrow brings more showers for Jeju and some of the inland areas, but overall, the strong heat will continue for the time being, so please stay hydrated and pace yourself outdoors.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.